Welcome back, everyone, to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. We are talking about financial tips for underclassmen, and I'm thrilled, as always, to welcome my colleague, Tara Piantanita Kelly, who's a former financial aid officer at a number of institutions, including Rochester Institute of Technology. Hi, Tara. How are you?
I'm really good. Thanks. How are you?
Great. I'm doing well. We're quarantining at home. Fun stuff. All right. Well, why don't we start? I think there's a lot of great advice that you shared with me before the show around what 9th and 10th graders could be thinking about right now. So why don't we start with that? What are the primary things that you would want them to focus on?
So as I was putting this together, I was thinking, when my kids were in 9th and 10th grade, what was I doing? And I came up with a very bad acronym, SIRP, S-I-R-P. It's save, invest, research, and plan. So I guess we should start with, save. Saving is always a good thing, right?
Yes. Let's start with save.
Okay. Well, the old adage, buy low, sell high, right? Now you got plenty of opportunities to buy low right now.
Yes.
So, now's a great time to perhaps invest or save. Could be in your 529 plan, or it doesn't have to be. So you just know you have some big expenses coming up in the next few years. So being prudent about saving right now is a good idea.
A quick question for you. So one of the things I know that we hear frequently is, we shouldn't have even bothered saving, because if we hadn't saved, we might have gotten more aid, and we talk about it a lot, but I always feel like it bears repeating. What is the reality of saving for college and its impact on your financial aid prospects?
Gotcha. Does saving for college reduce your ability to receive some need-based aid? And the answer is yes, it does, but probably not to the extent that you would think. So I have families quite often that come to me and they say, we need to restructure some of our assets and before we go to college. And it's like, well, before we do that, let's talk about your income first, because if your income already precludes you from getting any need-based aid, you could have $1 million in the bank. It's not going to make a difference because your income puts you out of range already. But the assessment rate for parental assets is about 4 to 6%, meaning if you've saved $100,000, that is only going to reduce your student's eligibility for need-based aid by between $4,000 and $6,000. So which would you rather have, $4,000 to $6,000 more in aid, or $100,000 in the bank?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I just think it's such a good point to make. And while certainly it might be a really difficult time to save money, if you can still save even just a little bit, even if it's half of what you were doing before or a quarter of what you were doing before, I think it's valuable, right? To your point. And it might end up, if you can invest it now, it may end up growing to the point where it's even more valuable to you down the road. So
that's exactly right.
All right. So then actually the next in your SIRP, which I would agree, questionable acronym, but whatever, it works. Maybe people will remember, is investing. So what's the difference between investing and saving, especially if you're putting money in a 529 plan that's being invested?
Right. So for the investment part of my SIRP, it's more of an investment in the student, in your child. And what I mean investment is there anything that you can be doing that will help them get better grades, or help them get a better, standardized test score, or help them, is there some tutoring that you could do to increase those, or, some test prep to increase those, or is there some kind of enrichment program that you can have them go to? Because, yes, there's an initial outlay in money for those, but the possibility of getting a merit scholarship, that could be the return on the investment for, putting the money out for test prep or tutoring or educational enrichments. It could be outweighed by getting a merit scholarship, perhaps.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really good one, because I agree. Sometimes it's worth the investment in something like test prep, because sometimes a couple more points on the ACT or a few hundred more points on the SAT could be the difference between qualifying for a merit scholarship or not, or getting a bigger merit scholarship, right, than the one that you might have had. And by the same token, getting involved, doing things outside of the classroom doesn't have to cost money, but sometimes there are options that do cost money, and weighing the benefits of, if I invest $500, $1,000 in this today, and my student gets a lot out of it that then, you know, they're writing about in their essay, or that they're including in their activities list, or that actually helps them bank some experience in their field of interest. These could all be beneficial for exactly the same types of things, like merit scholarships, or like not spinning your wheels when you get to college because you've tried out a particular area and you know that you really like it, or that you don't. And so you're, you know, not necessarily wasting time and money taking classes towards a major that you ultimately won't like, or that when you get out and you get a job in the field, you decide, wow, this is not the field for me. So
I don't want this. Yeah.
exactly. It's sort of that adage, you spend money to make money.
Mhm.
It's a little, it doesn't kind of jibe with, it doesn't seem logical. And yet I do feel like it can be something worthwhile. The one caveat that I would add is just, you have to make sure that your kid will engage. So it doesn't do you any good, right, to spend money and invest in them if they're not going to take advantage of the program or participate in the test prep and that kind of thing.
Very, very true. Very true. That the whole lead a horse to water thing.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So you don't put good money after bad if your child is not going to engage. That's a whole other conversation for another day.
So true.
All right. So the next letter in your acronym is R. So what's R stand for?
That was the perfect time to research and research some specific things. So specifically, now is the time to determine if the family might qualify for any need-based aid when the student goes to college. And there's a couple of ways to do that, and there's a couple of really good reasons to do that. So right now they could run an expected family contribution calculator. That's on the College Board's website. It'll take about 4.5 minutes. And it will, you know, it will ask all of the same questions that the financial aid application asks as far as finances and family. And then it will say, based on this, the student's expected family contribution is this, and it will say it. And that's the number that colleges use to determine if that student qualifies for any need-based aid at their school. So if the family is running the expected family contribution calculator and they're changing the inputs, what happens if, you know, our income goes to this? What happens if our assets are this? And the expected family contribution continues to come out at, you know, $80,000 or higher, that family is just not going to qualify for any need-based aid. And it just means, okay, we redirect our focus and start looking at merit opportunities, that's all. But if the family does qualify for some need-based aid, then there's definitely some things, some planning things that they could be doing that will benefit them when the student does go off to college.
Before we get to that planning, that last P, can we talk for a minute just about the merit aid? So you said, you know, those families where it's becoming very clear you are not going to qualify for any need-based aid, and yet you're potentially thinking to yourself, well, it's really great that they believe I can contribute $80,000 or more, but I don't believe I can contribute $80,000 or more, or maybe more to the point for some people, I don't want to contribute $80,000 or more because I personally feel like that's too much. And, you know, I have a base of what I think is more reasonable to pay for this. I think a lot of people automatically go to the, oh, I need to do a scholarship search. I need to apply for scholarships that are available out there. And, you know, they are hoping that their child will engage in this, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. Is that the best way to go about getting merit aid?
I would say no. Just, I mean, there are outside scholarships out there, but I believe the most recent statistic we saw said that only about 7% of a college's college bills are paid by outside scholarships and employer reimbursement. So the outside scholarship is actually even less than that. The much larger, the much better way to look for scholarships is from the schools themselves.
Yeah.
So, and the best way to do that is to have what we call it, you know, that balanced college list. Don't just have your student apply to all of the, you know, top tier schools, make sure that there are some schools where, yeah, he'll definitely get in, and make sure that there are some of those no problem schools, because those are going to be the schools that have the higher likelihood of offering the merit scholarships to the student. So
Right. And if those, and this could be part of the research piece, right? You could be looking at schools of interest and see what they say about merit scholarships at the school. Do they have any criteria?
right.
And therefore, can your child be working towards that? That's a great example of how do you know if 2 more points on the SAT might get you more money? Well, if you've done the research and the school has laid it out for you, it might be pretty clear. And therefore, you will know maybe it's worth it to invest in a little bit more test prep so that my student can hit that number and therefore then qualify for maybe more merit aid.
That's exactly right. Some schools are so good about laying it out in a grid. If you hit this benchmark, you get this amount of money. And
right.
if your kid is 1 point away from that,
Then
maybe
that's exactly right. Then you're going to be out of luck. All right, so let's go to the last P in your acronym, and that stands for planning. So back to the whole need-based aid piece, you mentioned that planning ahead is going to be really important here. So what can you share with us about that?
Yes, absolutely. So what families need to determine is what are the base years of income that will be included on the financial aid application for their student. So if you have and I had to write this out for myself because I don't want to do it in my head. So if you have a 10th grader, then that student is going to start college in 2022, and 2020 income is going to be included on that financial aid application. Yes, 2020, what we're going through right now is going to be on the financial aid application for your sophomore's freshman year in college.
My son, yes, yes. Right now,
so,
it's impacting him for later. Okay.
Exactly. And for families with freshmen, then that's going to be the 2021 income. So if you've done the research and you think, yes, there's a possibility for some need-based aid, and you know what the base years are going to be of income that you're looking at, then you're going to want to try not to have any kind of big bumps in income during that year. Don't sell a property that causes a capital gain. Just be mindful that the income for this year is going to impact your sophomore, and the income for next year is going to impact your freshman. So if the family doesn't qualify for any need-based aid, they don't need to do much of this planning. But if they do have the possibility to have some need-based aid, then definitely do some planning during this period.
Right. You don't want to make a choice out of the blue this year that you've been chugging along, you're going to qualify for need-based aid, and then all of a sudden, because of a bad choice that you make, or a choice that you make, bad or good, right, this year, that suddenly means that now you're not going to qualify for aid, or you're going to qualify for significantly less aid.
Yes. I did that exact thing. I got married, and we went from getting some need-based aid to not getting need-based aid.
Yeah, that is a tricky one.
It was just a choice, so I'm glad you pointed that out.
Right, it's a choice. It was a great choice for you personally, and in the end, you guys worked it out. But it is, it's a choice, and it has wider ranging impacts.
It
right?
does. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, that I think people don't always realize. Any last tips, Tara, before we say goodbye?
Just real quick about the assets. So if you do qualify for need-based aid, the assets are as of the day that you file your financial aid form. So it's not the income looks at that one particular year, assets look as of the day that you file. So if you qualify for some need-based aid, then be careful with your assets between now and when you do your financial aid applications.
Got it. So if you file your application the day it's available in October 1st, and then you sell that piece of property after that, then that's not going to impact you, at least for freshman year. But then, of course, it will be part of the calculation the following year.
Right. So there are strategies to do with timing.
Got it. All right. Tara, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about extracurricular activity planning for the younger set. So don't go away.